Financial Argument. Follow us on YouTube.
Now, as we know, Obamacare, it is deteriorating very, very quickly. We see out in Minnesota, Obamacare Marketplace, well, they're in an emergency situation right now because Minnesota allows rate increases by at least 50%, according to the state commerce commissioner. And Minnesota's Department of Commerce Commissioner Mike Ruffman said that the 5 companies offering plans through the state exchange or directly to consumers threatened to leave the market for 2017. So we can see right now out in Minnesota, it's a complete disaster. Now, throughout the country, we see that Obamacare is in a death spiral. More and more insurers, they're saying that we need to leave. We see the co-ops completely imploding on themselves. And at this point, we need to get rid of Obamacare. Because when you look at this, the people actually have spoken. Because if everybody wanted it, and everybody wanted to get into it, and they thought it was a great benefit to them, there'd be hundreds of millions of people signing up to Obamacare. When you see 10, 15 million people sign up, the people are saying, listen, we don't want this. And the only reason the 10 to 15 are those people that are getting subsidies, and the other people had to switch out of their other insurance plans. So at this point, the people have spoken, and they are screaming very loud that we do not want Obamacare anymore. We see from a Rothschild insider, they are telling us that they have planned these race wars in different cities. And if we go back to 2013, a whistleblower and a Rothschild family insider warned that the elites, they were pushing for a race war in America. They want control of the United States. They want martial law. And they were going to do this in many of the different cities. And they said that they have been trying. It has not been working out. And to achieve this, they need to do some social engineering by instigating the situation in different cities. Now, we have been seeing this. And what they're saying is they're not going to give up. We're going to see more of these incidences. We know Soros is behind this. We know the elites are behind this. And they're trying to get this off the ground, but it hasn't been working. We see there was a new joint investigation by the Sunday Times and the Bureau of Investigative Journalism. And what they found out was the Pentagon paid PR firms based in the UK over $500 million to make fake terrorist videos in Iraq as part of an enormous propaganda campaign. PR firm Bell Pottinger fabricated short TV segments designed to imitate Arabic news networks and fake insurgent videos, which then could be used to track the people who watch them. And they use this to convince them of terrorism. Now, do you think they're not using this here? Of course they are. With the NDAA and a writer that was on the NDAA, the United States government central bankers, they have the right to use propaganda on the people. And since that was passed, I think in 2011, we've seen many false flags. We've been seeing lies in the corporate media and a lot of propaganda used on the people. Both the White House and General David Petraeus, he was the commander of the coalition forces in Iraq, he signed off on the program. And we know the president also knew about this. So what we're seeing is that they know how to make these videos. They know how to use the propaganda. And they're allowed to use this propaganda not just on the people of Iraq or Syria or Lebanon or Libya, but on the American people. And this is what we've been seeing. We've been seeing theatrics. They've been using this everywhere. And they've been paying companies to do this. This is why when we look at these videos, they don't look real. They look like we're sitting at a movie. And it's all fake. And this is why we see fade outs. This is why we see the anomalies in what is happening. It's just like a movie. When you watch a movie and you say, hey, wait a minute, that light was on 1 minute, now it's off the next minute in the same scene. Well, that's an anomaly. They didn't pick that up. The same thing with these different videos that they put out there. So what we're seeing right now is that the U.S. government central bankers, they have been using propaganda on the people. Why have they been using it? Because they're trying to create an enemy. They're trying to bring us to war. They need this war. And we can see that propaganda is not going to stop. Because what we're seeing right now is the death of the dollar, the death of the petrodollar system, the death of the U.S. dollar being the reserve currency. The central bankers, the U.S. government, they don't want to lose their way of life. They don't want to lose the profits. They don't want to lose the control. And they'll do whatever they have to keep the control. They don't care if they have to bring us to war. It makes no difference to them. Because the central bankers, they have no allegiance to a country, a group, to a people. They have allegiance to their selves, to profit, to debt. And they want to maintain control. This is what it's all about. Doesn't matter what system we're on, what currency we're using, as long as they have the control. We see out in Libya, the bombing has intensified in Libya because we know the unity government out there, they are doomed. We see right now that they don't have control of the oil ports. And the U.S. wants the unity government in control because the United States understands, the United States government, I should say, they understand without the petrodollar, the system comes crashing down right now. And they can't allow these countries to kick out the puppet governments. They need them in place. They need control. They need the petrodollar system operational. Because once the petrodollar system is removed, and the other governments in those countries, they say, we don't want to use it. We don't want to use the dollar. We want to use maybe the euro, maybe the yuan, maybe the ruble, maybe even gold. That's when everything completely falls apart. And it will be blamed on the central bankers. This is the only reason they will not let it fail right now, because they don't want to be blamed for it. They rather start a war than to be blamed for the economic collapse. Because if they're blamed, how are they going to start it all over again? If we go to war, it has nothing to do with them, even though it has everything to do with them. Now, we see the battle out in Aleppo is raging on. We see Syria, the Russian forces, they are pushing the terrorist groups controlled by the United States government central bankers out of this area. This is a strategic location for the United States and their terrorist groups, where they have the supplies coming in from Turkey. They have a corridor set up. They use Aleppo as a spot where they can distribute a lot of the assets. And we're seeing right now the United States government central bankers, they're using propaganda, where they're out there saying that Russia and Syria bombed a hospital in Aleppo. Now, of course, they have no evidence to back this up. They have no satellite imagery. They have pretty much nothing. And what we're seeing right now is Russia is saying that please present the evidence. We will look at it. But from all our records, we show that we haven't bombed this area at all. Now, the United States, of course, has no proof. They can't hand it over to Russia whatsoever. And then Russia, all of a sudden, they haven't done it yet, but most likely they will. They'll produce evidence that it was the moderate rebels, it was the terrorists, which is one and the same, that they're the ones who decided to do this. Because what we can see is that the moderate rebels, al-Nusra, al-Qaeda, the Islamic State, these are all paid mercenaries. 95% of them, they're not even from Syria. They're paid by the coalition forces. They don't care about the Syrian people. They don't care if they torture them. They don't care if they bomb a hospital. They don't care. This is not their country. They're being paid to fight. The UN right now is looking at the situation in Syria, and they're saying that the US and the EU sanctions against Syria are punishing the population and make aid work in the country completely impossible. This is coming from a leaked UN report and internal letters that have been revealed. They're saying the restrictive measure contributed to the destabilization of every sector of the economy in Syria that used to be self-sufficient before the war began in 2011. The country now is dependent on aid, which is hard to deliver as sanctions make medicine, food, fuel, spare parts, and other essentials unreachable. This is coming from a 40-page UN report. So according to the UN, the sanctions introduced by Washington are extremely harsh regarding provisions of humanitarian aid. The American restrictions made money transfer into Syria almost completely impossible, preventing aid groups from paying salaries, purchasing supplies in both government and besieged areas. And it stimulated the creation of shady, unofficial network of money exchange, which is being used by the terrorist group, Islamic State, al-Nusra, al-Qaeda, all the groups that the United States backs, supplies, and pays. So what are we seeing right here? The United States government central bankers created this situation, and they did it on purpose. They're hurting the people of Syria. They're stopping the humanitarian aid reaching the people. They have the moderate rebels, the terrorists, destroy the humanitarian aid. Every chance they get, they want the people there to suffer. They do it in Yemen. They're doing it in Libya. They're doing it in Lebanon. They do it in Ukraine. So when we look at this situation, it's actually the United States. This is why we have this refugee problem. We need to go to the source of the problem. Just like there's an illness, yes, you can give medication. It will mask the symptoms. It will mask what you have. But unless you go to the heart of the disease, it can't be fixed. And when we go to the heart of this sickness, it's the United States that's causing all of it. If you have the United States cut out from all of this and they don't pay the terrorists, they get out of Syria, guess what? The refugee problem goes away. If they get out of Libya, if they get out of Yemen, it all goes away. The people can stay in their country. There's no more war. It's that simple. But they use a lot of propaganda, and they put up smoke screens so you can't figure it all out. But we can see right now, the United States works very closely with al-Qaeda, al-Nusra, the Islamic State. They're friends with the U.S. government, central bankers. They do their bidding. We see Turkey right now is sending in 1,000 special forces. They're on a secret mission. You know what that mission is? It's to secure the security zone that they cleared out. So what they're doing is they're already preparing the area. Turkey has already raised its flags there. The United States has raised its flags inside a sovereign country. Lavrov right now, he's trying to put together talks with Kerry. They have been talking. He wants to prevent the failure of the Russian-U.S. agreement. But we can see right now, it's not going to work. Syria and Russia are saying, listen, all those rebels, all those terrorists inside of Aleppo, we will allow you free passage to leave this area. And just leave. No questions asked. Let the civilian residents live their normal lives in this area. You know this is not going to happen. The United States government central bankers control them. Maybe a couple will leave, but the rest, the U.S. is going to say, no, you stand and fight. And we can see right now the Russia-U.S. relations, they're completely falling apart. Moscow right now is halting the plutonium cleanup accord because they're saying the situation is deteriorating, and they're starting to say, okay, we're going to suspend an agreement with the United States for disposal of weapon-grade plutonium because of unfriendly acts by Washington. So the U.S. right now, because of all the propaganda they've used and from the war that they created, well, they're ending diplomatic relations with Russia on Syria. They're done. This is coming from the State Department spokesman, John Kirby. And of course, they're accusing Russia of targeting critical infrastructure, such as hospitals, that they're preventing humanitarian aid from reaching civilians. But when you really look at this, John Kirby is really talking about the United States. They destroyed bridges. They destroyed oil fields. They destroyed hospitals inside of Syria. They destroyed humanitarian aid. It's all the United States. They created all of this. And what they do is they like to turn it around to make it look like it's their fault. This is what we call propaganda. And we've been following this, we've been tracking this, and we said from the beginning the goal was always to get Assad. They will never go along with any peace deal, ceasefire deal. Never happen. Because without getting into Syria, then Iran, and taking control of the entire Middle East, the petrodollar is completely doomed. Turkey right now is warning Americans about traveling to Turkey and staying in hotels because the Islamic State looks like they might be going after Americans. And it's not just in Turkey, it's throughout Europe. So we can see the situation is getting worse. It's not getting better. We see diplomatic ties have been severed. We see many different things occurring at once. And what's happening here is we're watching the economic collapse in real time. We're watching a war begin in real time, but we need to keep track of what is really going on here. We see the petrodollar is imploding on itself. The United States has no options left. The central bankers, the United States government, they're in a corner. So what's their plan? Their plan is to bring us to war. It didn't seem like a real possibility 2-3 years ago when we were watching the military assets being moved all over the world, where the U.S. was encircling China, when the U.S. and NATO were building up their forces in Eastern Europe, bringing in military assets and troops. It didn't seem like war at that point, even though when we looked at it, we saw what exactly they were doing. Other people said, no, this is normal. No, what they're doing is they slowly prepare for what is coming. It doesn't happen overnight. All of this does not happen overnight. The economic collapse did not happen overnight. All of this has been planned and prepared. We've been watching it. We see it. It's all real time. And we can see the next part of this is to start the draft. And we know Charlie Rangel has a bill floating around in Congress. We see an executive order 13603, which will have 2 drafts, one military, one civilian. will be headed up by the Secretary of Labor. We know that girls now that reach the age of 18, they'll be included to go to the front lines and be drafted into the armed forces. All of this was done on purpose. This was for the war that is coming. It just didn't happen by chance. All of this just didn't happen by chance. This was pre-planned. And we're at a crossroads right now where the United States government is bringing us down a path of war, down a path of destruction. Unless we, the people, change this, we will continue down this path. And we're almost to the end of this path. So time is short, because we know the United States government central bankers, they're planning on an event that is so spectacular that people won't even question it. They'll just go along with it. And when this system collapses, they will have this event. People will look at it, say, how dare they do this? We have to go to war. Think about 9/11, for instance, for a sec. When that happened, everyone was in shock. And whatever the government said, people said yes. People put, the American flag on their car. I remember driving down the street, everyone had it, flapping in the wind or on the back of their window. Everyone was a patriot. How dare these terrorists attack the United States? And of course, later on, people started looking at it and saying, well, wait a minute. But at that point, the U.S. government central bankers, they had the ability to do whatever they wanted. They had the ability to pass legislation. They had the legislation sitting there waiting, because they knew eventually they would have that event to have the legislation passed. And right now, we're at that point once again, where the central bank, there's legislation just sitting there, where they can take further control of the economy. There's legislation there to take away more of the people's rights, to bring us to war. I mean, the authorization for war is just sitting there. They're waiting for the event. So we can see we're at that point once again. This whole entire system, it's not just one thing. It's all interconnected. The collapse of this system, the war, is all one and the same. It's all driven by the central bankers. And their next step is the first phase of the collapse, is an event. The second phase, they'll be bringing us to war. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.